Hello. Welcome to a Foxhole Leadership special, or just if you haven't watched that, a plain how the heck does this game that I just heard about work, and what is the point? I'm RG. I run a clan in Foxhole. It's called the 13th, and I thought that I would sit down and try and help some of the guys who are new to the game, or who's just looking at the game, seen some, YouTube videos and are like, oh, this looks really cool, but what the heck is the goal even? So it's going to be game set, like just how you actually win the game, which is the first slide here. And then I'm just going to talk about how you, like, in game win the game, right? Because those two things, like, it's basically how do you win the game and how do you achieve winning the game. And it's going to be very broad. It's mainly fed from a comment I had specifically. This comment that you can see right here. And I thought that was just talk about the first part because I don't want to talk meta because there's just meta about everything. My immediate response to that was, and I showed some of the officers, they're like, what meta? The bridge meta? The building meta? Production meta? What meta? There's so fucking many. So not going to talk about that because there's too many. But we can talk about how this game actually works and what do you need. What's the concept? So you can see here, I have a map of sorts, and there's a lot of blue, a lot of green, and a little bit white. And the these buildings count as victory points. And on the top left, you can see an from the game, like from within the game itself, an infographic, basically. This graph shows how many town halls, which is the victory points, marked in white, and the color that they have on the map here is what a war will typically start off with having. So typically it's, you always start off half and half, and you typically go from north to south, like north versus south, but it can be altered so you can start different. Basically, there's some different presets of war sides that we cycle through, just so you don't have the same exact war all over again when you finish. But this is the ideal standard one that I show you right here. And the line is essentially what splits what starts as colonial and what starts as warden. The white towns are specifically towns that starts off as neither, right? So the main point of the game is to turn all the white ones into your faction's color. In my case, that is blue. And the opposing factions' town halls also, until a certain cap, right? So you don't have to turn all of the opposing factions' town halls to your own color. Just have to turn 29 total town halls to your faction. That's what you can see up on the infographic. I took that from the current war where you can see that the blue faction is winning with 27 to 29. And it leaves about like I think it's 3 or 4 town halls left. So you have to take majority of the opposing team's town halls, but not to a point where if you force the whole game to be at one specific town, that kind of kills everyone, and you can't host that many people on the same server. So they made a cap that is pretty sensible, in my opinion. But under that, you have something called war achievements, and it's basically like before we got these, it was just you either win or you don't win, right? But with these, it's become a lot easier. Like you could be pushed all the way back, have 5 times left, but actually, like, there's still some achievement if you manage to hold those 5 times for one day. There's an achievement for that. That's the shield, and 2 days is the sandbags with a flag, and those contribute. So after when you eventually lose, if you lose, you can win back from that. But if you eventually lose, instead of having a decisive victory over you, it might be a close victory, or it might be a costly victory, or something like that. Essentially, it's a way to gauge how well did you lose the war, right? So it's not just you lost, you suck. You can achieve things on top of just winning or losing. And when you win, you might have some achievements as well that makes you win better or more, I guess, which is a really cool mechanic. So now that you have a basic understanding of what you want to achieve to win the game, I think we should move on to what you actually need to do in order to achieve this, which is actually what the game's all about. And this is the main idea, right? So a lot of people look at this and only see the combat. There's a lot of combat, but what is important to understand is for every second of combat, there is an equal or greater amount of seconds spent on logistics, because the game is just built up about every time you want to use a gun, someone's had to produce that gun. That's what's illustrated here on the left. It's a lengthy process. You first have to scrap your materials, transport them to a refinery, refine it, transport that to a production facility. If you make tanks with it, you get the tanks. If you have to make everything, guns, medical equipment, the trucks that you used earlier. If you can't find a truck, you got to go out manually, scrap, refine, make your truck. All of those things, everything has to be transported, often from the back line, as you can see on the right. You might produce it in the first town because that town has the most production capabilities. It's not all towns that has all production facilities, but the further back in the region you get, the more of these production facilities you have at your disposal. You might produce it really far back and then transport it up to the front line where you then distribute it. And I know that you see a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, we have to charge this hill and then we win this battle. But if you run out of guns after you got on the hill, well, then you're going to be pushed a whole lot further back than what you just took. So really, the game is won by logistics, right? Like, you might have a lot of people who are good at using your stuff, but if you don't have anything to use, then you will inevitably be beaten. So this game is a lot more about managing your your logistics to your front line more than actually using them. Winning a front line is often also a result of one side having better logistics than the other, not just in terms of how much supply they get, but also what type of supply. You might be able to supply just your front line just fine with rifles and basic infantry equipment, but if the other side of that conflict gets a tank or a howitzer or some kind of anti-infantry weapon and you don't get the countermeasure, well, that is not really the front line's fault that they're falling at that point because they literally can't do anything, right? So a lot of this game is actually won by strategizing on what a frontline needs, when to give it to them, and how much. Anyway, that's just my quick little thought and explanation of how this game works. If you want to see more, or if there's a specific subject in what I've discussed here that you want to hear more about, shoot me a comment and I'll most likely make that video. If you're interested in learning how clans work and how clan leadership works, I have a full playlist that I'll link just after this on the card that you can just hit up. I think it's about 4 videos right now. It explains all you need to know about running a clan and ops and stuff like that. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you for watching, and I hope you got what you wanted from this video.